Oh, I started off actually in college many years ago when I was 18. It was easier to buy the ingredients and make beer than it was to go to the corner 7-Eleven and have somebody buy it for you. you know? And a friend of mine was a home brewer and said, let's go make some beer. And started doing that, started developing a taste for it, and then I got a job in college at a brewery. That was in San Diego, and got my first paycheck in Associated Microbreweries, San Diego, California, in 1991. Kept working in breweries during and after college, worked my way up, kind of expanded my skills, and then when I moved out to New York, came out with my girlfriend at the time, now my wife and business partner, Sonia. She's from New York. We moved out here. I took a couple years off of brewing just to pursue my major. That was a responsible thing to do, right? My major was international business with Russian and Eastern European studies with a Japanese minor. So I got a job, right, completely relevant. And then so I got a job at a trading company, Mitsubishi Corporation, worked there for a couple years, and then decided I needed to get back into brewing. Heartland was hiring. I went down there, got a job with Heartland in 2000, took over the reins at Heartland in 2001, brewed exclusively for them until 2006, and then opened up my own thing on the side. The brewing process is relatively simple, though it takes an extremely talented and dedicated group of people to make it work, right? Okay, so, but if you're doing a home brew, 5-gallon batch, or whether you're doing a 1,000-gallon batch, what we do here is still relatively small. You take a malted grain, you can buy grain from malt houses around the world, and so we use malted barley and malted wheat. You grind it and you soak it. Okay? At that point, you're creating a sugar liquid with the grain. Then you need to strain it. That process of straining it and rinsing it is a lot like making coffee in a coffee pot, in the sense you get the ground stuff, you run the hot water across it, it gets all the goodness out. The first little bit's really strong, the last little bit's really weak, but the net result in the kettle or in the brew pot is the strength that you want. So that's what we're doing, but we're going for sugar rather than caffeine, right? So we get it ground, soaked, strained. That process is called sparging. You get it into the kettle, you bring it up to a boil, you get that liquid boiling, you throw in your flavorings. In this day and age, most of the flavorings are hops. Okay, so you get hops at the beginning for bitterness, you get hops in the middle and the end for more aromatics and more floral qualities, depending on the hop itself. You can also, this time of year, add cinnamon and ginger and orange and all the relevant holiday flavorings at that point. But it's basically like a big 1,000-gallon stock pot, and you're boiling up the liquid. Then you cool it down, you strain out all the solids, the little bits of grain, the hops that have made it through the process. You strain those out through a fairly coarse strainer, get the beer into the fermenter, cooled down, and put yeast in it. And that's really where the bulk of the beer making happens, is in the fermentation vessel. And getting that yeast in there, letting the yeast consume the sugar. That's what yeast does, right? Consumes sugar and exudes alcohol and CO2. It's excrement. Is alcohol. It's kind of magical. And a brewer's job really is creating a great, stable, clean living environment for yeast and giving it some good food. And then letting the yeast do what it needs to do. And picking which yeast you want to do, whether it's an ale yeast or a lager yeast, a Belgian ale yeast, or whatever, to get different kinds of flavors and characters out of the beer. So put it in the fermenter, let it ferment out. It takes about 10 days to 2 weeks. Let it condition. Ales are pretty much ready to go at that point. Lagers usually take an extra week or two to condition. And then you filter it, strain it, keg it, drink it, basically. Heartland had originally, it opened in Union Square in 1995, and all the beer they made there was served there. Then they opened up another location in 97, and it had a very small operational brewery in that was a 4-barrel system as opposed to a 15-barrel system. They weren't able to produce enough beer in both locations to feed both locations, so they had to start contracting out from a different brewery out on Long Island to be able to fulfill their demand. Then when they opened up the 43rd Street location, they built the size out big enough so that now all the beer could be brewed in-house once again. But what wound up happening is you wind up having now effectively 3 different breweries, 2 fully operational and 1 kind of a pilot system. But the 2 fully operational breweries are brewing in different locations. They're getting different grain deliveries. They have 2 separate sets of pumps. They have 2 different brewers. They have 2 separate sets of motors and things that can fail and issues and problems. And then the beer started to taste a little bit different from one spot to the other spot. And So just in 3 locations, it was starting to become a little problematic logistically. Then we realized, look, we want to open a bunch more, and this is going to start to become really problematic, trying to run different breweries in each spot. Wouldn't it be easier, in addition to saving on retail rent? You know, in Manhattan, you're paying for the brewing space, you're paying Manhattan retail prices. Right? Why don't we just find an industrial space in Brooklyn where we can pay industrial rent, brew all the beer in one spot, have one brewing team, maximize our economies of scale where we can buy silo loads of malt and truckloads of hops and bring them in, get a price discount on that, and increase the amount that we're using so that the cost of our beer remains the same, but we're able to put more stuff in there because we're realizing an economy of scale. So the idea was to increase the amount of stuff we're putting in the beer, to increase the flavor, to make up for the fact we weren't making it right on site. So we deliberately tried to change that up, and basically now we can open up as many restaurants as we want and brew all the beer in one space. So at that time we had 3 restaurants, now we have 7 with a couple more in the works, and we can fill that from this production pretty easily. We built this place out for Heartland Brewery in 2002 to 2003, and then I decided I wanted to brew my own thing and do my own beers, and I approached the ownership of this facility in Heartland Brewery and asked them if I could just brew my own beer out of here anyway and put my own name on it. So they allowed me to do that, and I've been doing that ever since. It does all happen together here, but a lot of it comes down to what kind of beer I want to brew and when I want to brew it. Sometimes there's an overlap, sometimes the beers are very similar, and then sometimes I can just kind of take the gloves off and kind of throw the book at it. And when I'm brewing a beer for Heartland, it's in the context of the Heartland ideas and the Heartland locations and the other beers that Heartland has on at the same time. Since we do all of those beers, every new beer that we do, we want to make sure fits in and is separate and distinct from the other beers. Right? When I'm doing Kelso, I'm putting it out into hundreds, if not thousands, of bars and restaurants in the greater New York City area, and I put those beers out just in kind of context of whatever I feel like putting out, and the timing, the season, and what ingredients I could get a hold of. Maybe I can get some special smoked malt from Massachusetts or this and that and the other thing, and kind of play around with it a little bit. But there's a much broader audience when I'm sending out the Kelso stuff. The Heartland has got a very specific audience. Well, right now, Kelso goes up as far north as Saugerties, and as far east as Montauk. In fact, there's a bar in Montauk that I'm trying to get them to put it on the most easternmost tap. So I can be like, I've got the end from corner to corner. I've been talking with some distributors in Boston and in Connecticut, and not that Boston's a state, but kind of we'll go through as much beer as Connecticut. And also discussing about going south as well, going down into the southern states. Haven't really gotten there yet. There's a lot of things that need to happen before that happens, but we're constantly thinking about it. The main thing for us, though, is to keep the beer fresh and to keep it as locally focused as possible. So there's a whole new kind of series of challenges that involve going out of state, trying to keep that freshness and keeping that locality relevant. Right now, we're making about 25 different styles at any given time with all the different brands that we're making, not just Heartland and Kelso, but some of our other contracts that we're making out of here as well. And we're making about 55 to 60 brands throughout the course of the year. We're making, 1 barrel worth of production equals 2 kegs of beer. So we're making about 15,000 barrels of beer a year, which is 30,000 kegs. And we think our capacity will be around 20,000 barrels or 40,000 kegs. So about half of that is Heartland Brewery, and the other half is a mixture of Kelso and some of the other contracts that we're brewing for right now. We have recurring seasonals every quarter, and then we just do some random stuff periodically. We have a lot of barrel aging that we're doing, so we're taking some of our regular beers and throwing them into brandy barrels or Cabernet barrels or whiskey barrels. We have some Jack Daniel's barrels as well. So long story short, I'm releasing a lot more things more regularly than my distributor really likes, I think, because we just keep throwing brands at them and throwing new styles and new interpretations of old styles and new names, and just trying to keep a lot of our tertiary beers exciting and relevant. And then really trying to nail the Nut Brown Lager, which is our flagship, and the Pilsner and the IPA, just trying to nail those exactly, keep them the same year in and year out, and then play with all the other stuff. Even our Pale Ale, which is a year-round regular beer, we're constantly modifying the hops, modifying the yeast, trying to get just the right flavor to come out of it. So it's one of the harder beers to do, a good solid Pale Ale. Well, craft beer is important because it's got a lot more flavor, and it's got a lot more layers. It's much more enjoyable on a superficial level, just on an initial flavor level, but it's a lot more satisfying, I think, to your soul and to your body, because you're eating something or you're consuming something that's made with care and has got a lot of layers to it. Not saying that the bigger stuff isn't made with care, but it's not designed to have a lot of layers. It's designed to be flavorless. And where craft beers are designed to have flavor and to be interesting to every individual person. So we do a lot of different styles and do a lot of different things, and they all have something that you might like but you might not like. And the idea is that you can go out, you can fine tune and find a beer that just really hits home. And the craft beers are going to be able to do that, whereas a lot of the macros are not. It's the old school way of getting your beer. Getting it locally. So you can go to your corner bodegas. A lot of them are starting to do growler fills now. So you can go down and get a half-gallon jug to go just down the street at Brooklyn Beer and Soda, and you can go Beer Craft or Whole Foods, a number of the Whole Foods locations. Dwayne Reed, for God's sakes, they've got growler fill stations. You can go in and get half-gallons to go. So we're in most of those places, and then your local pub, whatever your local pub happens to be. If they don't have Kelso now, they may have had it already, or they're planning on rotating it through, or we'll get Jess to go over there. Jess is my salesperson. She'll get over there and knock on the door. So yeah, just look locally. And we have a list on our website. Try to keep it pretty relevant.